Hi, how are you? Good, excited. Yeah,
Yeah, you too.
okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. We're PopGirlz Scotland. I'm Rachel.
I'm Josephine.
It's really great to be here, and this is our first lecture in Ireland as well, so very excited. I hope you enjoy what we have to say, and I hope that we can have a chat and learn some things together from this too. Great.
Cool. So we'll just take you through the agenda that we're going to follow today. Some parts are a bit more casual, so we'll start with just sort of who we are and what we do, introduce you a bit more to ourselves and our team, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to have a look at the gender gap, which will involve looking at the research published by Vic Bain. We're going to have a look at a project called Friendly Festivals in Scotland, which is a project we're working on with one of our partner organisations. And then we're going to get into our campaigns against Spotify, which is the kind of activism side of PopGirlz, which are the campaigns that kind of put us on the map in Scotland as an organisation fighting for equality in the arts. And then we'll finish things up with just looking at nurturing networks and what PopGirlz are doing in our scene in Scotland to try and create a healthy scene. So it won't all be doom and gloom, but we'll try and keep it as light as we can.
Cool. So I'm Rachel, and I created the group PopGirlz Scotland. It's a support group for all cis and trans women, as well as non-binary people who are comfortable in a space that centres around the experience of women in music. Here's just a wee photo of some PopGirlz at a social, I think it was 2 years ago. We have our wee face masks on as well, because we're cute. I founded the group back in November 2019 with the idea of creating a safe and motivating space for female artists. And it's grown so much since then. We have now over 160 members, and our aim is to tackle sexism within the music industry, share music industry knowledge, and build members' confidence. It is made for artists by artists. We've got collaborative Facebook and Instagram pages and a Twitter page, and it's very much peer-to-peer support. I also organise social events. In the pandemic, we were having online socials, but it's really great now that we can actually meet up in person. And yeah, although we are a small group, we are very professional and we do not tolerate hate in any shape or form. We also have a privacy policy within the group, so whatever is spoken about within the group stays there, and we don't speak about it outside of the group. We're just very conscious that Scotland is a small place, and we just want to keep safety as a key aim of PopGirlz. And we really expect all members to treat each other with respect, and just keeping the group nice, safe, happy environment. So yeah.
We'll take you through our team and partners now. So we'll start just by introducing ourselves a little bit further. My name is Josephine Sillars. I'm originally from the Scottish Highlands, but I'm actually based in Leeds now. I moved to England 6 months before the pandemic. So that was a wonderful time to move to a new city. But while living in Glasgow, I performed with my old band, and many, many bands, performed at heaps of festivals around the UK as well as in Europe. I've had BBC support for quite a lot of my music as well with my old band and with my solo project that I'm kind of pushing now. And I also come from a kind of theatre background. So I've worked for several theatre companies in Edinburgh and Glasgow, and I've done the Edinburgh Fringe as a solo artist before. I've paid my dues. I also have worked as a composer. So from 2016, actually up until the pandemic, because sadly the games development company I worked for closed during COVID. But from 2016 until then, I worked for a company called Orthra Studios, doing sort of incidental music for most of their games. And the biggest project was doing a full soundtrack for their game Distant Kingdoms, which you can get on Steam. I've also spoken at several panels on sync and publishing. I also have a distinction in my master's from Leeds Conservatoire, which is the whole reason reason I moved to England was to get that master's, and I wanted to sort of introduce myself to the Northern English scene, because the Scottish scene and the Northern English scene are so close, and yet they don't really speak. So obviously there was a worldwide pandemic right when that happened. But since moving to England, I've had quite a lot of funded support, being supported by Arts Council England, as well as Help Musicians, and sort of local government grants through Leeds City Council. Yeah, which you can just kind of see there. My Arts Council England grant is officially closed as of today. That's my funded period with them ended today, which is quite nice. It's been a nice 12 months of funding from them. And yeah, I work with a bunch of bands in Leeds now, and I work with a small label in Leeds as well. So that's me and my background.
Cool. So I'm Rachel, but I perform under the name Cola. I actually went to the art school in Edinburgh and I studied painting. So I kind of just fell into music over time. But I really love doing lots of different areas of arts, such as singing, dancing, songwriting, music production, painting, drawing, and poetry. I guess I quite like combining everything, and I'm always thinking of new things I want to do. Just decided this week that I'm going to do a podcast as well. So yeah, I'm self-managed and I self-PR. A lot of my, all of my work has been featured on BBC, including BBC Radio 1. My most recent single was featured on the BBC Radio 1 Introducing Hot List, and I was one of the best songs of the year in the Herald newspaper in Glasgow. And yeah, I've been kind of recognised worldwide, but I'm still like a very small artist. Yeah, I do my own shows as well. So and my show before the pandemic involved dancers and a backing band, and I sold it out really early, like 6 weeks in advance, just because I'm very much into the DIY scene and I really like taking control of all aspects of my art. And yeah, I was nominated for Best Newcomer at the 2020 Scottish Alternative Music Awards as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back though. I haven't released for a couple of years, but I'll move on to that shortly. I'm also doing a lot of collaborations. I really enjoy working with other artists, such as B. Charlotte, Talia, Elizabeth Electra, Lylura. These are all Scotland-based artists, but I'd love to work more internationally as well. And yeah, I've been funded by these lovely funding bodies. So Creative Scotland, Help Musicians, PopGirlz Foundation. I'm currently making an album at the moment, including lots of female session musicians, female PR, female radio pluggers. I just love being able to give back to my community, and yeah, there's so much talent. So yeah. Cool. I guess we're going to move on to our partner organisations. So
yeah, so we work with quite a few partners across Scotland, including PopGirlz in Music, who are a promotional blog and social media entity for supporting women working within the Scottish music industry. Face, which is a collective for female music producers. The F List is probably one of our most sort of well-recognised partners. If you're not familiar with the F List, they're a directory of over 4,500 UK female musicians, and they were founded by Vic Bain, whose research we're going to go into a little bit in this lecture. She's a really interesting figure in the music industry at the moment, and especially in music academia. Her research has been quite groundbreaking, so we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. We also work with Henhoose, who are a sort of songwriting collective aimed at getting music syncs for film and TV for female songwriters. They were also recently shortlisted for Scottish Album of the Year award. They sadly didn't win, but it was still very, very exciting to see their album recognised on such a high level in Scottish music. We also work with POWA, who again we'll chat about a little bit more because we do quite a lot of projects with POWA, and they're a group founded by Siobhan Wilson, which aims at protecting women in the arts in Scotland.
Cool. We're going to move now onto the county music industry. So the research written by Vic Bain, the founder of the F List, and we're going to talk a bit more about PopGirlz and the gender gap in the music industry. So who is Vic Bain? Vic Bain is the former CEO of the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers and Authors, and a Henley Business School MBA graduate. She's got 25 years of experience in the music and creative industries. She works in campaigning, researching, training, presenting, and consulting on all aspects of diversity in the music and creative industries. And obviously she's part of the F List, who are our partner organisation, who are amazing for us to be working with. So her body of work, County Music Industry, it uncovers how the UK music industry professionally supports female musicians compared to male musicians, and shows there's a lack of women and therefore the gender gap in music. This can be determined by focusing on the gender balance of those who are assigned to labels and publishers. This is important because those who are assigned to publishing companies and labels are the ones who receive professional and economic support and investment to nourish and support their careers and therefore earn money. So County Music Industry reveals that just over 14% of those currently signed to 106 music publishers and just under 20% of those signed to 219 record labels are female. She's created a music awards flowchart here, which show that record labels and publishers are the primary gatekeepers before judges give out their awards. So you have the labels and publishers signing artists. The artists are then entered into awards. There's a judging process, and then the awards are given. But obviously, if the artists aren't signed at the grassroots level, they won't reap the awards at the very end. However, there's been some great initiatives battling against this, such as the PRS Foundation launching the Key Change Initiative. This encourages festivals to programme 50-50 lineups between male and female performers, and it's been successful all over the globe with hundreds of festivals signing up. And there's been some improvements. So female representation has increased from 14 to 19% last year, while the percentage of groups with at least one female or non-binary member held relatively steady at 11%. So there's a little bit of improvement for females, but really across the board, not a lot of change.
I think it will be quite interesting to keep an eye on Key Change in the coming months as well, because their initial campaign was due to end with 2022. It was when it was initially launched, it was for a 50-50 gender split by 2022. So it'll be quite interesting to see where they go as an initiative coming into the new year. If anyone's particularly interested, I would keep an eye out.
She's made up another flowchart here to do with festivals. So again, it's the same kind of thing where artists with record labels and managers are then sent on to booking agents, then sent on to promoters, and then wind up on the festival lineups. But it's really so much more difficult for artists who aren't with labels and managers at the start getting that investment to then move on with their careers towards the end. Cool. I think this is you, Jo.
Yeah, so one of the case studies that we used to kind of look at this in context is a festival called Transmit. In Scotland, this is the festival that took over from Tea in the Park when Tea in the Park stopped, and it's one of the biggest festivals that happens. It's also quite exciting as it's a city festival, so it moved from being out in the countryside with Tea in the Park to being held at Glasgow Green, which economically really exciting for the city, really, really brilliant for local music scenes, or so you would think. Over the past couple of years, I mean, there has been improvements with Transmit, so I do want people to be aware that the case studies we're using are from pre-pandemic Transmit. It's 2019, 2018 are the sort of years we look at. But it's still got a very long way to go. So we've got an article here just from the Scotsman in 2019 discussing the fact that Transmit that year unveiled an all-male lineup of headliners, which included Stormzy, Jerry Cinnamon, Catfish and the Bottlemen, Bastille, George Ezra and Snow Patrol. Promoters who are DF Concerts, who we will mention probably quite a few times. They're one of the biggest promoters in Scottish music. They also unveiled 18 acts who will be performing at a new Queen Touch Tut stage at Transmit Festivals next month under the drive to tackle what they admitted was a gender play gap. This was kind of billed as paving the way for female headliners. However, the new stage was announced with just over a month before the festival was due to take place. And many organisations, including the Musicians Union, were very quick to criticise, as the main programme was announced in February, where female acts such as Sigrid, Mabel and Jess Glynn were revealed to be making up just under 20% of the overall lineup. Quite a lot of our pop girls actually did play on the Queen Tut stage that year, including Tamzine and Scarlett Randall, which was quite exciting. And I know Scarlett Randall at the time did a very interesting interview where she did discuss the fact that, yes, she didn't feel comfortable with the fact that there was such a lack of female representation at the festival overall, but she still wanted to do the gig, wanted to perform, and felt that she owed it, you know, to her fan base and to her own sort of artistic growth to take the opportunities when they come. And it was a really, really good article, which if anyone is more interested, I'm sure you can get it up on Google. But yes, there was definitely a mixed response to Transmit as a whole that year. We've got a quote from a blog called Highway Queens tweeting that the festival should just book more women on all of the stages next time. And this is kind of an ongoing issue that you see in a lot of festival bookings, whereby when people seek to include more women, be more inclusive in these lineups, they actually end up alienating and segregating rather than integrating into the festival as a whole. Yeah. Do you want to chat about this one, Rachel?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, this is just another article by the Glasgow Guardian by Chloe Waterhouse, just saying that the instalment was a late addition to the male-dominated lineup, which was released earlier in the year. DF Concerts described the stage as a platform for core female artists at grassroots level to help them become the bill toppers of the future. But it's really, the issue is that there should be women on the main stages, and there are women who are that far along in their careers, so it didn't really make a lot of sense how they just weren't booking more women. Comparing this to Primavera Sound in Barcelona, which is one of the biggest music festivals in the world, they achieved the 50-50 gender split that same year. And in response to their success, 45 other events pledged their commitment to achieving a 50-50 gender split in their lineups by 2022. So how could Transmit organisers have rectified their original blunder, since the Queen Tut stage was formed of those mostly local talent? Perhaps placing them in a 50-50 gender split on King Tut stage would have conveyed their gender play message far better. Although the Queen Tut stage provided welcome coverage for blossoming female acts, this coverage could have been provided in a far more attentive manner. Transmit, learn your mistakes, don't alienate, and integrate. I think that's very well said.
I think the next slide just goes into a bit more detail on some of the backlash that it received. There's we've got sort of more quotes from the Musicians Union, given the fact that in 2018 the festival was quoted as having a commitment to do better in terms of a gender split. There was also a really incredible quote from Jeff Ellis, who's the director of Transmit and very high up in the Scottish music industry. This quote is quite infamous and I'm never going to let it go. But as the official response to the criticism, he stated that we'd love for there to be a higher representation of females, but there isn't, certainly on the acts we're announcing today. It will be a while until there's a 50-50 balance. That's definitely several years ahead for any major festival to achieve, because there's far, far less female artists. We need to get more females picking up guitars, forming bands and playing in bands. So this was in 2019. This was not very long ago that he said that, and this is quite a neoliberal statement. You can see here that the blame for lack of female representation is placed back on female artists rather than sitting with the promoter. And it's a statement that really does just suggest that it's women that need to step up to the plate. It's completely removing any blame from the promoters and positioning them as reacting just to solely what's out there in the music scene. And this just simply further serves to maintain power structures which allow female performers and any performer who is marginalized really to stay in that kind of space and not break through the ceiling to get to the larger stages, to get to the main stage. Yeah. given that Primavera achieved this the same year, I think the comment was particularly, I don't know, not very tactful to say the least.
Yeah.
You can see as well, there's a quote we've got from Clash Music, which I think sums it up perfectly. They criticised the Queen Tut stage as a somewhat patronising reworking of the King Tut's Wah Wah Hut moniker and of ghettoising female talent and promoting them poorly. So you can see here that with Jeff Ellis and with the sort of upper tier of the festival, it kind of serves a very white, sort of European male, laddish kind of ideology surrounding the top tier of the festival. And it's just creating the smokescreen. So by having a smaller stage called the Queen Tut stage where the women are allowed to play, it just kind of shows that they're not actually dedicated to committing to sorting the gender play gap throughout all of the stages. And promoters such as Ellis, they hold such a great deal of power in national and local music scenes, and it's a social privilege that's only going to be further maintained. So speaking up for these kind of equalities is always really, really important. There was a huge backlash to this at the time. I think Scottish Twitter had an absolute it got quite a lot of attention. And we haven't actually collected stats on the most recent transmit, but through another one of our organisations and projects that we're doing, which we'll talk about a bit later, we have had correspondence with them and their reactions have been positive. So it just goes to show that when you see inequalities, the best thing that you can do is to speak out. People very much perceive DF and transmit as a big scary force in the Scottish music industry who you don't want to get on your bad side. But ultimately, if we don't have these conversations, then things won't change.
Just compare this to Glastonbury. Between 2007 and 2021, 8 out of 10 headliners at Glastonbury were all male. Beyonce in 2011 and Adele in 2016 were the only female soloists to ever headline between that time. The organiser, Emily, has committed to creating an equal gender balance of performers at the festival. After The Guardian revealed in 2015 that the lineup was 86% male. She said they're working towards 50-50 and they're having some issues with that. However, the 2021 event, Live and Worthy Farm, was only 38% female. However, the most recent Glastonbury in 2022, Billie Eilish headlined. It was all over the press. And they did feature a 50-50 gender balance. However, they included mixed gendered bands within the female 50%. So it really would be better if they actually categorize that more clearly. We're going to just look a bit into safety as well and how that affects musicians at work. The Incorporated Society of Musicians published the Dignity at Work, a survey of discrimination in the music sector in 2018, which revealed that 47% of respondents had experienced sexual harassment, inappropriate behaviour or discrimination. Of that number, only 23% went on to officially report the behaviour. Of the 77% who did not officially report it, 81% of them cited fear of losing work, not being taken seriously by the perpetrator as the reason they did not do so. The fact that we have any women at all navigating and creating successful musical careers despite these barriers demonstrates the ambition, strength and resilience of female musicians today. And here's some things that we can do to hopefully progress. We could have, obviously, record labels signing more females. We're presently at 20%. It'd be great if we could have 50%. Encourage females to play more traditionally masculine instruments. What we mean by this is, for example, when I was in school, I learned the clarinet, but I could have really done with learning music production because that's the area that I work in now. And it was never really offered to me in school and it wasn't really encouraged. We can also improve music pathways and entry routes for graduates and more communication collaborations with the music industry and music businesses, government funding and support for gender diversity initiatives, arts councils and charities such as Creative Scotland, Help Musicians, PRS Foundation, all who are really great. Legislation, improving the pay gap, sexual harassment, parental leave, motherhood, those areas that really aren't touched on enough. This would result in a greater pool of creativity and potential and consequent economic benefit to the music industry. So the music industry would make so much money if they did this, but they're actively not doing it. Cool.
We're going to very quick. Oh, sorry.
You can go ahead, Jo.
Yeah, we're just going to very quickly look at friendly festivals in Scotland. We're not going to go into this in huge detail, but it's a project we're working on with two of our partner organisations, POWA and Fanny Riot. Fanny Riot, we didn't mention them in our previous list of partners as they're not so much a music organisation, but they're just an activist organisation fighting for protection at music festivals. Cool. So back in 2021, POWA reached out to us about creating friendly festivals in Scotland, which is a 2-column data set, 1 column listing Scottish music festivals and the second depicting whether they have sexual misconduct policies available on their website.
It's a very clear website.
I hope you're ready for some statistics because it was quite incredible the response we had. As you can see, only 8% of music festivals in Scotland reference this issue on their website. The statistic has slightly changed because we've now had responses from 64 festivals. However, only 2 of them have a clear visible policy on their website. So 1 out of 59, 2 out of 64, it hasn't really changed the statistic all that greatly. And this is a real issue, not just for musicians, but for the festivals themselves. If you don't have these types of policies clearly available on your website and something, God forbid something happens at the festival, you are liable legally. And it's an issue not only for musicians and performers, but for staff who work there. It's an issue for audiences who are just going to enjoy the festival. And this is something that we are working on with our sister organisations to just try and bring more awareness. A lot of the festivals we've spoken to have had really positive reactions. Most of them were not even aware that this wasn't something they were already showing. And the reaction has been to rectify this. And a lot of the festivals are making changes, which is really good. But we're hoping to build more with that project into next year.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we're going to look now into local music scenes and practice, local music networks. So just to give kind of a rundown of the stats of PopGirlz, there's 167 members within the private Facebook group. So that's where the action really happens. That's all members kind of discussing pros and cons of the music industry, giving support to one another and knowledge. And then we have been building up our other social medias. Please feel free to give us a follow on our Twitter, like our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram. Our Instagram is mainly like our public face, and we do kind of share stuff outside of PopGirlz with that as well. And yeah, that's our email too, popgirlscotland@gmail.com. This is just kind of a brief overview of our Instagram page. We try and make it as inviting as possible, and we've got a lot of kind of highlights of what we've been doing and sharing just the work of other pop girls and how they're building their careers in the scene too. Josephine and I regularly attend networking events, and we do talks. And not just at universities, we also did a workshop at Music Broth, which is a charity in Glasgow, talking about shifting the power and just issues within gender in the music industry, which was really fun. And we're going to be speaking at Resonate in Glasgow, which is a music conference. It's one of the biggest in Scotland, so we're very excited to be speaking there. And we're going to be giving more of a rundown of our campaigning with Spotify, which is going to be exciting. And yeah, here are just some pictures from our social events. As I said before, we have our online Facebook page where that's where a lot of members meet each other first, and then I'll arrange a social event, and it's really lovely to see everyone meeting together in person. I think on this occasion, a lot of those pop girls were meeting each other for the very first time, and everyone got along really well. And yeah, it was lovely. And yeah, also meeting each other online first gives us all a chance to hear each other's music too. So when we actually do speak to each other in person, we've got a lot to talk about, and yeah, it's really fun. And we've got some feedback here. We're always asking for feedback from every social that we do, just to know how we can improve it going forward. And yeah, we actually went to, we do other things outside of socials, like we go to gigs our friend Becca, who performs as Shears, was performing at the BBC tent in the Edinburgh Festival in August. So a lot of us went down to support her, and it was lovely there too. This was our most recent social. We did an open mic night just a couple of weeks ago at the art school in Edinburgh. And we had a lot of new pop girls coming along and performing.
We did. I think actually about 80% of the people that came down were people that followed PopGirlz on Instagram but weren't actually a part of the group. So the fact that we had so many new members join from that night was really, really exciting. And hopefully we'll be able to run more.
Yeah. And it was also just a really good opportunity to for pop girls who haven't performed since the pandemic to actually get back into performing in a safe environment, and then to get some feedback as well. And I actually performed for the first time in years, and it was really helpful for me just to like have a really welcoming environment, and just kind of taking the pressure off. I kind of said at the start, like, it doesn't matter if anyone forgets their lines or lyrics, if they sing out of tune. We're all just here to support each other. I sang out of tune. I definitely sang. But it was a really lovely event that we held, and we made tickets free as well. So hopefully we can continue this next year and do more of a series of events, hopefully all over Scotland. I mean, we'd love to come to Ireland as well, and just keep on moving this outwards. So yeah.
Now that we've talked about the fun stuff, we're going to talk about the more challenging elements to what we deliver at PopGirlz. So the biggest campaign, the one that we're probably most well known for, is PopGirlz versus Spotify and structural bias in the industry. This is very much how I kind of became a part of the collective. Back in 2020, Rachel initially didn't intend for this to be a campaign in the sort of more structured sense, but there's a playlist on Spotify, which is an editorial playlist called Scotify, very creatively named, and it kind of functions as the new Music Friday of Scotland. It's a very big deal to get on this playlist. I've had one song featured on this playlist as a musician, and the streaming difference compared to my other.
Oh, I think we've lost her. I'll just continue this until she gets back online. Yeah, the kind of the difference in the amount of streams that you can get from playlisting is really severe. So back in November 2020, 67% of the playlist featured male artists and 33% featured female artists, and this included mixed gendered bands. Of the 57 artists featured, it transpired that only 5 of these artists were solo female identifying, 9%. With 70 tracks on the playlist.
And with 72 songs on the playlist, there's only 1 male act and 1 female act with a multiple song featured, which is a really, really big change. And we're really happy about that, especially from like the initial campaign. However, there's still only 4 people of colour on the entire playlist, which is just kind of beyond shocking. It's not representative of Scottish music in the slightest, and they can do better. They simply can do better. Yeah. And just for clarification, with mixed gendered groups, we've included, that includes if there's a band that of 5, cis men and one woman, that's a mixed gendered group. We've also included, so if they've got a trans female artist, we've counted them as a woman in the female category. Same with trans men that are in the male category. Mixed gendered really is just any combination of any gender identity is included in that statistic.
Yeah. We've got another lovely playlist here with a similar issue. This is the We Are Glasgow playlist. They have these really inclusive names for playlisting. And the playlist features 36 male artists, 61%, and 7 female artists, 13%, and 12 mixed groups, 26%. So very disappointing. There are 100 songs on the playlist, with 15 male acts having multiple songs featured, 69 songs, 5 female acts having multiple songs featured, 13 songs, and 4 mixed gender groups having multiple songs featured, 18 songs. The playlist only features 4 people of colour as well. Just another thing that I want to touch on here is the issue of having multiple songs. It's also not great, because it takes up so much room that could be given to other artists. Every single week there's loads of artists in Scotland releasing new music, and it's just quite disappointing that they're giving so much room to the same artists on the playlist, and most of them are white cis male.
Yeah, the fact that of 100 songs, 69 are multiple songs is just beyond shocking, and again, not representative of the current music scene that it's supposed to be representing.
Yeah. Another lovely playlist, Made in Scotland. This playlist features 53 male artists, 70%, 6 female artists, 8%, and 17 mixed groups, 22%. The playlist has 76 songs and no multiple songs, which is actually a good thing, and only features 10 people of colour. I think this is the most severe statistic of all of them, the 70% male artists Made in Scotland. We're actually campaigning at the moment for Made in Scotland, We Are Glasgow, and Spotify to be redone by the editors of Spotify, and we have been receiving quite a lot of praise for it. A lot of people have been sharing it, so we really would encourage everyone here, if you would like to get involved, please do. We've got some graphics on our Instagram. We've got like a reel, and we've got just a post page with all the stats, and we've been sharing them along with our communities and our lectures as well. So if you've got a spare minute, we'd really appreciate it. Cool.
So we're going to chat a little bit now about false consciousness and how what we've just kind of discussed with the context of Spotify creates this in the current music scene. So if anyone's not familiar with the term, false consciousness was first sort of coined. It's a Marxist term, and it describes that workers, even the most exploited, who are often steeped in the bourgeoisie ideology of individualism and materialism, are not expected to be automatically develop a critical class understanding of their difficult life circumstances. And I've got a quote at the top from Billy Bragg, talking about mixing pop and politics. He asks me what the use is. I offer him embarrassment and my usual excuses. While looking down the corridor out to where the van is waiting, I'm looking for the Great Leap Forward. So the Great Leap Forward is a song that Billy Bragg wrote sort of following a landslide Tory victory in the government. And you can see how this kind of ties into the idea of false consciousness quite easily, actually. He's discussing the idea that working class people voted against their own interests because they were manipulated by propaganda and campaigning into voting more right wing. And the idea is that a great leap forward has to happen in personal ideology to be able to make choices that better your circumstances. And this sort of leads into false consciousness because it's the very idea that people shouldn't be expected to develop that kind of understanding. And you can see the continued quote talking about ideology, therefore, was seen to act as a mystifying smokescreen, a vehicle through which the ruling classes sought to promote and protect its interests while tricking the population into thinking that the rulers were concerned about the well-being of the people. It's a little bit dense, but it will make more sense in context when sort of applying this to the modern music scene. So while Bragg's discussing it in a more broad sense, exploitation through the abuse of power is a major issue in the modern music industry. And we've got a quote here from The Independent, where writer Callie Tarry argues that through streaming and online platforms, it has never been easier to be an independent artist, with social media and streaming meaning an artist can break a scene themselves. However, as we've just discussed and as we've just seen through the Spotify case study, there's so many determining forces around gender, race, sexuality, class divisions, which maintain structural inequality throughout all levels of the industry. So you have the possibility of young female artists creating independent music being very real, but then having that music accepted by the platforms which will offer them to audiences, and having those audiences engage with them is revealed as a fiction. And you can see really how this false consciousness idea really just encapsulates a lot of how we look at modern streaming culture and digital culture within the music industry. Anybody can pick up a guitar nowadays and record it, or record a video and stick it on YouTube, but that doesn't mean you're going to go viral. You know, the way that the scene has developed with digital culture is very different to how it was 20, 30 years ago. And even though it seems like there's this promise of a free and, you know, sort of, for lack of a better term, a free socialist kind of music scene where everybody can get involved, that is not actually the reality at hand, sadly.
Yeah. We're going to carry this through with reports on sexism. We've got a really great article here in the Times by Joanne, talking about how streaming platforms really are wired to be sexist and racist, and unless we have editors going in and manually fixing them, the algorithm is just going to multiply on itself. I've put a picture of Lewis Capaldi here just to give an example of what Spotify did for his career. So his first single, Bruises, was released in 2017, I think, and it was positioned at #1 on New Music Friday, which is the biggest editorial playlist for pop music in the whole of the UK. And from then on, he got millions of streams, and his career really catapulted, and now he's a global superstar. So just the power of streaming really can really transform an artist's career. So however, the music streaming giants such as Spotify and YouTube have a women problem. Their algorithms, which recommend things that you might like based on your listening habits, are basically sexist, generating playlist after playlist dominated by male musicians. There's some stats here by a university in Netherlands and Barcelona, where academics analyze the listening patterns of 330,000 users over 9 years. Only a quarter of the artists they listened to were women, because on average, the first algorithm recommended track was always by a man. Listeners had to wait until the 7th or 8th song before even hearing from a woman. So that's quite heartbreaking.
Yeah. It would be interesting to pay attention to your own listening habits as well. I mean, I know for me, and Rachel, I imagine it's the same for you. I know that my own Spotify is very much geared towards women. I get more women than men suggested, I think, just because of my listening habits. But if you're a more casual user of Spotify, I would recommend just sort of paying attention to this next time you're listening to a playlist on shuffle or one of the algorithmic playlists. Just, it can be quite interesting just to see for yourself what your own listening habits are.
Yeah. And obviously, like the editors at Spotify could really change this so easily. They could just put more women on the playlist and moving them further up. Because obviously, if you're at the top of the playlist, you're going to get more and more streams than if you're further down at the bottom of the playlist. It's a very easy fix. And obviously, streaming really isn't going anywhere at the moment. It's still so popular. 400 million people subscribed to at least one streaming platform in 2020, up from 76.8 million in 2015. However, royalties remain low, and those who feel hard done by are reluctant to complain for fear of alienating the all-powerful companies. We actually saw this when we ran our Spotify campaigns before, where quite a large number of pop girls weren't sharing the posts, who even admitted that they were quite scared to do so for their own careers. But in saying this, Josephine was a leading member in this campaign, and she campaigned very hard, and her song was even put on the Spotify playlist. So
yeah, literally when they updated it after the first campaign, they put my song on it. So I really do not think that I don't think they even made the connection between my song and it being me who was campaigning against them. Like, I don't honestly think they're paying that close attention. It's more important that we use our voices to have these conversations, because Spotify's not sitting there going, oh, so-and-so shared a Instagram post that had bad things about us, we're going to make sure they're not playlisted. Like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And I think, Rachel, you've mentioned a really, really good point about the positioning on playlists as well, because something that is consistent with Spotify when we do these statistics, there's some really high profile acts in Scotland who are consistently at the lowest numbers on these playlists. Scottish Album of the Year winner from 2020, Nova, who is a young black woman, is consistently at like number 68 out of 70, you know, that kind of thing. And then again, Talia, who is a trans female artist, she's a double award-winning SAMA winner for her electronic music. She's also Say nominated. You know, she's really, really quite prolific in Scotland, really doing amazing work, and again, consistently at bottom of all of these playlists, which just kind of goes to show that they're not actually being supportive. You know, it's all very well putting women on the playlist, but if you're going to put them at the bottom, it's like
yeah, and it's really not going to change unless we speak up and we get them to do it manually. It says here that platforms offer more and more of the same based on what you've listened to before, and musical discovery is reduced to the lowest common denominator by data-driven machines. So yeah. A bit more on Nova here. I think this is yours.
Yeah, so during the first campaign, this is something that we think is very important to always bring up. Nova actually got in touch with us, and we had a conversation around the idea of like a 50-50 gender split being quite a binary way of understanding criticism, especially given that the campaign, when we initially ran it, it was kind of very much coming off the back of the Black Lives Matter campaigning, which was really, you know, had a worldwide presence in 2020, and the hurdles that and the social politics that race bring to the conversation are really immense. And although lessons can be learned, the restrictive and damaging practices of institutionalized attitudes towards people of color really shouldn't be blended with arguments of gender, class, and sexuality, as it dilutes and diverts from the problems faced. It's a lot easier for white women artists to be assimilated into performance spaces, and trying to maximize an opportunity for yourself can often end with people entering into a social contract that's automatically exclusive of others. We really valued this feedback from the first campaign. Thought it was a really important point, really good to share, and that's one of the reasons why in this next campaign a lot of our focus has sort of got a spotlight on the racial inequalities, because even though the gender inequalities on these playlists is bad, I mean, I think for Made in Scotland, it's 96% white, that playlist. 96%. There are some very high profile acts in Scotland right now who are not white. There's some amazing acts in Scotland who are not very high profile at all, but still making amazing work, who are not white. All of them deserve a spot on this playlist. 96% white is just no longer acceptable. It's no longer acceptable.
We're going to move this into a bit more positivity now, nurturing network, social versus local. Just to give an idea of how PopGirlz meet each other before PopGirlz started. It'll be through gigs, through friends. I think me and Josephine met at a gig actually a couple of years ago, attending networking events, just Y Days, Off the Record, Resonate, which me and Josephine are speaking at next month, and through social media platforms. And we're also always just trying to raise our profile through word of mouth, promoting ourselves with other like publishers and Skinny. We had quite a good publication posted in PRS magazine, which had a lot of our stats from the Spotify campaign, which is really great for us.
I think the PRS stats are from March this year. So we have in the lecture we've just shown you, we've updated it since the PRS one, but they're not too dissimilar, to be quite honest.
Just to say that networking events are a really useful way to introduce yourself to the wider music industry. However, it's here that the juxtaposition between industry and community can clearly be seen. And the aim of PopGirlz really is to act as a space in the middle, a community-focused group that welcomes elements of the wider industry that is practical and useful for members. So we have so much posted within the group. For example, Aberdeen-based pop girl Rachel Jack updated the group last year with documents called A Guide to Spotify and Information and Marketing, just to help everyone else in the group. It was fantastic. And also we discuss everything from management, PR, venues, festivals, and various other elements of the industry in a non-judgmental and learning-focused space. So you are there for the network that you create.
It's a really wonderful group to be a part of for many reasons. I think in particular, I remember when I started in music anyway, often you'd be the only woman on a lineup with like 5 men, and as a result there was a lot of jealousy, there was a lot of competition, and that was encouraged by the music scene. Like, you weren't encouraged to make friends with your peers, you were encouraged to be in direct competition with them. So having a group which is more focused on friendship building over traditional networking, it really is helping create a more healthy scene, I would say. And I think where we're at in music at the moment, creating healthy communities, it should be at the forefront of what everybody is working towards, because we can do more as a united group than we can apart.
Yeah, and I think we've all learned so much within the group from one another, and also just amazing the friendships that we've built. So many of the pop girls now are literally my best friends, so I wouldn't have had that before. And yeah, just to summarize, thank you so much for having us today. Big thank you to Emily for booking us in. We are stronger together. We can speak out for equality, dismantle gatekeepers, and as you can see, change is achievable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
I think you guys are on mute, but thank you. We can
Thank
see.
You. We can see that.
See the clapping. Thank you. I think, are we doing questions now, or? I think there's a lot of initiatives happening at a grassroots level that we're seeing anyway, more than like a kind of big major initiative from the more major organizations, sadly. However, we're very lucky in Scotland to have a whole sort of plethora of smaller organizations that work here. So a lot of our sister organizations that we mentioned at the beginning are working on events, are working on sort of, you know, POWA run the tea parties, they call them, where they invite, usually on Zoom, just sort of inviting musicians in to talk with each other, learn about each other, and help promote each other's work effectively. We're also with them going to be hosting an event in the winter, which is quite exciting, which will kind of be like an office party for all of the grassroots organizations that are working towards this. I will say that in terms of initiatives sort of working at a higher level, a couple of our members who work with other organizations are currently sort of in the background working on initiatives that they're going to be bringing to the Scottish Government, which is really, really exciting. And this will be bringing about actual legislation for safety at shows and for ensuring inclusivity at performance spaces. At the minute, we're really functioning on small budgets with volunteers, but there's a lot of groups, like basically all of our sister organizations are working towards that goal. But we haven't yet seen an initiative, for example, on the level of key change really hit the Scottish music industry yet. It's all a lot more DIY at the moment, but it's good. I mean, I can think of, even though we have, you know, about 6 or 7 of our own partners, there's so many more groups that we are not partnered with. I mean, SWIM are a really wonderful group in Glasgow, working towards exactly what you described. There's quite a few more, because we have a big list of them for this office party, and so many of them we're not partnered with. But it is really wonderful that we've got a thriving scene in that regard, but sadly nothing at a more sort of legislative level yet. That's fantastic. No, that's really great. We'd love to connect with you, to be honest, at a later date. Yeah. There's a Oh, congratulations. That's really wonderful to me. That's really, really wonderful to hear.
Sorry, I can't hear that well through my speaker. It's breaking up a wee bit. I think I've missed some of that.
Oh. I'm really sorry, but we're only getting like every other word. I'm really sorry. I cannot hear you very well. Do you think, can you maybe come closer to the microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit clearer. Thank you. Yes. Ah, yes. So that's actually summarized. That section is actually summarized from my master's thesis, which went into class divisions a lot more heavily. So, for the purpose of this lecture, it is a very short summary just to use as a bouncing off point for students to engage with the theory. And my actual thesis would take way too long to summarize into the lecture, but thank you for that feedback. Well, it that's totally fair. I mean, in my thesis, it did go into the class divisions as a longer section, and that was more implemented throughout. For the purposes of looking at it through a gendered lens, it's more just about using the idea of false consciousness to expand our thinking into how we view gender within this kind of context. So even though, yes, it is based in class divisions, that's where the theory originated, and that's where a lot of my research looked at. You can still apply it to gender through that lens. And yeah, I do agree that it is more relevant to class. That is the point of the criticism. But yeah, for the purposes of what we're discussing, it's more just about how we can use that idea of false consciousness as a vehicle to examine gender inequalities. But no, thank you for that, because I can have another look at it. Cool.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.